January 4th, 1944, 23,000 feet above Kiel, Germany. Lieutenant Robert Johnson squints through the frosted perspex of his P-47 Thunderbolt cockpit, watching black puffs of flak explode in angry clusters around the B-17 formation ahead. The bomber stream stretches for miles, silver fortresses glinting in the pale winter sun, their contrails painting white scars across the frozen sky. His radio crackles with static and tension. Bandits! Bandits! 2 o'clock high. Johnson's head snaps right. There, diving out of the sun, a swarm of Focke-Wulf 190s, their yellow spinners cutting through the air like hornets toward the vulnerable bombers. His gloved hand tightens on the control stick. Every instinct screams at him to turn into the threat, to intercept, to protect those flying fortresses and the men packed inside their aluminum fuselages. But his orders are clear. Stay close, defend the bombers, don't chase. He watches, helpless, as the German fighters slash through the formation's edge, 20-millimeter cannons winking orange fire. A B-17 on the periphery shudders, its number 3 engine trailing black smoke. Another takes hits in the tail section. The WWIIs blow through the formation and climb away before the escorts can react, disappearing back into the sun's glare like ghosts. This is how it's been for months. The Luftwaffe strikes and runs. The American fighters, shackled to the bombers like guard dogs on short leashes, can only watch and react. By the time they maneuver to intercept, the German fighters are gone, reforming at altitude, preparing for another slashing attack. Colonel Hub Zenk, leading the 56th Fighter Group, feels the frustration burning in his chest as he orbits the bomber stream. His P-47 is a magnificent machine, rugged, powerful, armed with 8.50 caliber machine guns. But what good is firepower when you're always arriving too late? The Luftwaffe pilots have learned to exploit the American defensive doctrine perfectly. They know the escorts won't pursue. They know they can strike and withdraw with relative impunity. The statistics are damning. American bomber losses over Germany have been catastrophic. The October 1943 raid on Schweinfurt, Black Thursday, saw 60 B-17s shot down in a single mission, 60 aircraft, 600 men killed or captured in one afternoon. The 8th Air Force is bleeding, and the Germans are winning the battle of attrition. As the formation turns for home, trailing smoke and carrying dead men and shattered aircraft, the fighter pilots know something has to change. The current strategy is failing. The bombers are dying. And somewhere in the cold mathematics of war, someone is calculating whether the daylight bombing campaign can even continue. What none of these pilots know, as they cross back over the English Channel on this gray January afternoon, is that change is already coming. And it's going to be more radical than anyone imagines. January 6th, 1944. 8th Air Force Headquarters, Bushy Park, London. Major General James Harold Jimmy Doolittle strides through the corridors of the requisitioned mansion with the restless energy of a man half his age. At 47, he's already a legend, the daring pilot who led the first American bombing raid on Tokyo in April 1942, launching B-25 bombers from an aircraft carrier in a mission everyone said was impossible. He's an MIT-educated engineer, a former air racer, a test pilot who pushed aviation technology to its limits. Now he commands the 8th Air Force, the most powerful aerial armada ever assembled, and he's about to make a decision that will horrify his own men. Doolittle sits at his desk, studying loss reports and after-action summaries from the previous months. The numbers tell a story of brave men dying in a flawed system. The defensive fighter doctrine, keeping escorts tied closely to the bomber formations, was designed to provide maximum protection. In theory, it should work. In practice, it's a disaster. The Luftwaffe isn't stupid. Their pilots have adapted. They've learned to attack from angles where the escorts can't quickly respond. They strike from high altitude, diving through with devastating speed, then use their energy to climb back out of range. By the time the American fighters react and maneuver to intercept, the Germans are already repositioning for another pass. Worse, the Luftwaffe is conserving its strength. Why engage in prolonged dogfights with American escorts when you can hit the bombers and run? The German fighter pilots are racking up bomber kills while avoiding the one thing that could defeat them: sustained combat with American fighters. Doolittle's engineering mind sees the problem clearly. The current doctrine treats fighters as defensive weapons, shields to absorb attacks. But fighters are offensive weapons, predators, not prey. The P-47 Thunderbolt and especially the new P-51 Mustang are superior to most German fighters in combat. American pilots are well-trained and aggressive. So why are they being used like static guards? He calls in his fighter commanders, men like Hub Zemke, Don Blakesley, and others who've been fighting this air war since the beginning. The meeting is tense. Doolittle lays out his new doctrine in stark terms. Gentlemen, effective immediately, our fighters will no longer fly close escort. The room goes silent. From now on, your primary mission is to destroy German fighters in the air, on the ground, wherever you find them. You will range ahead of the bomber stream. You will hunt. When you encounter enemy aircraft, you will pursue them until they're destroyed. You will strafe their airfields. You will force them into combat and kill them. Colonel Blakesley, commander of the 4th Fighter Group, speaks first. General, the bomber crews are going to feel like we've abandoned them. I know, Doolittle replies, and that's exactly what they're going to say. They're going to scream bloody murder. But here's what they don't understand. The best way to protect bombers isn't to hover around them like mother hens. It's to destroy the German fighters before they can attack. We're going to take the fight to the enemy, on our terms, not theirs. It's counterintuitive. It goes against every protective instinct. It will terrify bomber crews who've come to depend on seeing friendly fighters nearby. But Doolittle is betting everything on a simple truth. You can't win a war by playing defense. The meeting ends with cautious acknowledgement. The fighter pilots like the new freedom. It's what they've been wanting all along. But they also know the backlash is coming. Bomber commanders will be furious. Bomber crews will feel betrayed. And if losses spike in those first few missions, Doolittle's career, and possibly the entire strategic bombing campaign, could be finished. As the officers file out, Doolittle allows himself a moment of doubt. He's staking everything on this decision: his reputation, the lives of thousands of men, the success of the invasion being planned for France. But he's also studied the numbers. He knows that the Luftwaffe has about 1,400 fighters defending Germany. He knows that German pilot training has deteriorated badly as the war drags on. New pilots arrive at frontline units with minimal flight hours and almost no combat experience. And he knows that the P-51 Mustang, now arriving in significant numbers, has the range to escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The pieces are in place. Now comes the test. January 1944. RAF Debden, England. Captain Don Gentile walks around his P-51B Mustang, running his hand along the smooth aluminum skin. The aircraft is beautiful, sleek where the P-47 is brutish, elegant where other fighters are functional. But beauty isn't what makes the Mustang revolutionary. It's the range. The P-51's secret is its Merlin engine, actually a license-built version of the British Rolls-Royce engine that powers the Spitfire. Mated to an American airframe designed by North American Aviation, it creates something extraordinary. A fighter with the performance to match anything the Luftwaffe can field and the range to go anywhere the bombers go. Previous American fighters, the P-47 Thunderbolt and P-38 Lightning, are formidable, but they're limited by fuel capacity. Even with drop tanks, they can only escort bombers partway into Germany before they have to turn back. This creates a deadly gap, a stretch of sky over Germany where bombers fly unescorted, vulnerable to concentrated Luftwaffe attacks. The Mustang solves this problem. With external drop tanks, it can fly to Berlin and back, over 1,300 miles. For the first time, American fighters can escort the bombers all the way to the target and all the way home. There's no more gap, no more safe zone where the Luftwaffe can attack with impunity. But range is only part of the equation. The P-51 is also fast, 440 miles per hour at altitude, and exceptionally maneuverable. In a dogfight, a well-flown Mustang can outturn a Focke-Wulf 190 and outperform the Messerschmitt Bf 109 at most altitudes. Its 6.50 caliber machine guns deliver devastating firepower. As January progresses, more fighter groups transition to the Mustang. The 4th Fighter Group at Debden, the 357th at Leiston, the 352nd at Bodney. Pilots familiar with the heavy, stable P-47 have to adjust to the Mustang's lighter, more responsive controls. Some pilots love it immediately. Others take time to trust the lighter aircraft. But everyone recognizes what they have, a game changer. With Doolittle's new doctrine and the Mustang's capability, the dynamic of the air war is about to shift fundamentally. The Luftwaffe has grown accustomed to American fighters being constrained by defensive doctrine and limited range. They're about to discover that both advantages have disappeared. The German pilots, comfortable in their proven tactics, are flying toward a trap they don't yet see closing. February 20th, 1944. 25,000 feet above Brunswick, Germany. The sky over Germany erupts into violence. Over 900 American bombers, B-17 Flying Fortresses, and B-24 Liberators fill the sky in massive formations, their combined contrails creating artificial clouds. But this time, something is different. Ranging far ahead of the bomber stream, flying in loose formations at varying altitudes, are hundreds of American fighters. P-47s, P-38s, and the new P-51 Mustangs. They're not hovering protectively near the bombers, they're hunting. Lieutenant Urban Ben Drew, of the 361 Fighter Squadron, leads his flight of P-51s toward a gaggle of German fighters, assembling 20 miles ahead of the bomber stream. In the old doctrine, he would never be here. He'd be circling the bombers, waiting to react to attacks. Now, he's the attacker. Tally-ho! Bogies at 11 o'clock level. The German formation, a mixed groupie of Bf-109s and FW-190s, is preparing to intercept the bombers. They haven't spotted the American fighters diving on them from above. The Luftwaffe pilots are focused on the distant bomber formations, calculating their attack vectors, preparing for the slashing runs that have worked for months. They never get the chance. Drew's flight hits them from above and behind, .50 caliber rounds ripping into surprised German fighters. A Messerschmitt 109 explodes, its fuel tank ignited. Another spins away, its pilot dead or unconscious. The German formation disintegrates into chaos, individual aircraft breaking in all directions, desperately trying to evade. But there's nowhere to run. More American fighters are converging from multiple directions. Under the old doctrine, the Germans could disengage, climb away, reposition. Now, when they try to run, the Americans pursue relentlessly. The sky becomes a swirling furball of twisting, turning aircraft, a three-dimensional battlefield where altitude, speed, and position mean life or death. Oberleutnant Friedrich Lang, a Luftwaffe veteran with 28 kills, finds himself in his worst nightmare, a sustained dogfight against multiple opponents. He throws his Focke-Wulf 190 into hard turns, trying to shake the Mustang glued to his tail. The American pilot, whoever he is, matches every maneuver, closing the distance meter by meter. Lang knows his aircraft, he knows its strengths, but the P-51 is simply better, more maneuverable, faster in level flight, and the American pilot is good, very good. Tracer rounds zip past Lang's canopy. He jinks right, pulls hard left, reverses, nothing works. The .50 caliber rounds finally find their mark, tearing through the FW-190's engine cowling. White coolant smoke streams back. The big BMW radial engine begins to seize. Lang has seconds to decide, bail out or try for a forced landing. He never makes the choice. More rounds hammer his aircraft, and the Focke-Wulf rolls inverted and plunges toward the earth, trailing black smoke. All across the German sky, this scene repeats. Luftwaffe fighters, attempting to attack the bombers, are instead ambushed by aggressive American escorts. When they try to disengage, the Americans pursue. When they try to fight, they're outnumbered. When they try to land and refuel, they find American fighters strafing their airfields. This is Big Week, 6 days of maximum effort missions designed to break the Luftwaffe's back. The weather, which has been terrible for weeks, suddenly clears. General Doolittle orders every available bomber and fighter into the air. The targets are German aircraft factories and ball-bearing plants. the industrial infrastructure that produces fighters and components. But the real target isn't the factories on the ground, it's the fighters defending them. The American strategy is brutally simple. Force the Luftwaffe into sustained combat, make them defend their homeland, engage them in dogfights where American numbers, pilot skill, and aircraft performance can dominate, and most importantly, destroy their irreplaceable, experienced pilots. February 20th sees the largest air battle yet, 1,000 American bombers and 835 fighters versus nearly every operational Luftwaffe fighter in Germany. The Germans have no choice but to respond. If they don't defend their aircraft factories, Allied bombers will destroy them. But defending means exposing their fighters to the aggressive American escorts, now flying with Doolittle's new doctrine. The Luftwaffe loses 21 fighters on February 20th, 29 on February 21st, 33 on February 22nd. The numbers climb each day as American fighters rampage over Germany, no longer constrained by defensive doctrine. February 24th, 1944, 15,000 feet above Akmer Airfield, Germany. Major Walker Bud Mahurin of the 56th Fighter Group spots the airfield below, a cluster of hangars and parked aircraft beside a grass runway. It's a target of opportunity. Under the old doctrine, he'd have ignored it, staying with the bombers. Under Doolittle's new rules, it's fair game. Blue flight, we're going down. Watch for flak. His P-47 Thunderbolt tips into a steep dive, accelerating toward the airfield. 3 more Thunderbolts follow, their pilots scanning for anti-aircraft guns. The altitude drops rapidly, 10,000 feet, 5,000 feet, 2,000 feet. Mahurin levels off 50 feet above the grass, his fighters screaming across the airfield at 400 miles per hour. His thumb mashes the gun button, and 8.50 caliber machine guns hammer to life. The sound is like ripping canvas magnified 1,000 times. Parked German fighters, Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs lined up in neat rows, disintegrate under the onslaught. Fuel tanks explode in orange fireballs. Canopies shatter. Aluminum skin tears apart. In 15 seconds of strafing, Mahurin destroys 4 aircraft and damages 3 more. Behind him, the other P-47s make their runs, methodically destroying aircraft that will never fly again. Light flak tracers arc up trying to track the fast-moving American fighters, but the Thunderbolts are already pulling up and away, leaving burning wreckage behind. This is the new reality for the Luftwaffe. It's not enough to survive combat in the air. Now their aircraft are being destroyed on the ground. Their airfields are under constant attack. Pilots who land to refuel and rearm find themselves strafed while taxiing. The Americans are hunting them everywhere. By February 25th, the final day of Big Week, the cumulative effect becomes clear. The Luftwaffe has lost over 450 fighters destroyed and 300 damaged. But the losses that matter most aren't the aircraft. Germany can build more fighters. It's the pilots. Over 100 Luftwaffe pilots are dead. Another 200 are wounded or captured. These aren't novices. Many are experienced veterans, the backbone of the fighter force. Men like Oberleutnant Ernst Süss, an ace with 63 victories, killed in action on February 21st. Or Hauptmann Heinz Knoke, wounded and temporarily out of action. The Luftwaffe's pilot training program, already strained by fuel shortages and the demands of a multi-front war, cannot replace these losses with equally skilled pilots. The replacements arriving at frontline units are boys with barely 200 hours of flight time, compared to the 400-plus hours American pilots receive before entering combat. General Major Adolf Galland, commander of Luftwaffe fighter forces, reads the loss reports with growing horror. He understands what's happening. The Americans aren't just winning air battles. They're deliberately destroying Germany's pool of experienced fighter pilots. It's a war of attrition, and Germany is on the wrong side of the equation. In 6 days, the air war's fundamental dynamic has shifted. The Luftwaffe is no longer the hunter. It's the hunted. March 1944. Luftwaffe Jagdgeschwader, 2 Airfield, Beauvais-Tilley, France. Lieutenant Hans Müller, 20 years old with exactly 193 hours of flight time, climbs into the cockpit of his Focke-Wulf 190 with trembling hands. It's his 3rd combat mission. On his first mission 4 days ago, his Group L lost 3 aircraft. On his second mission yesterday, 2 more were shot down. Both times, he barely escaped, diving away from pursuing American fighters, using his aircraft's superior roll rate to evade, then running for home at maximum speed. His instructor, a weary veteran with a bandaged arm and hollow eyes, had given him simple advice: stay alive for 10 missions. If you survive 10 missions, you might learn enough to survive 20. The odds are against him. In early 1943, before Doolittle's doctrine change, a Luftwaffe pilot might expect to survive 30 or 40 missions before being killed, wounded, or captured. Now, the average survival time is dropping precipitously. The aggressive American fighters give inexperienced German pilots no time to learn, no margin for error. Muller's group takes off in the afternoon, ordered to intercept American bombers attacking Stuttgart. As they climb toward altitude, the radio chatter is tense. Everyone knows what's coming, not just a fight with bombers, but engagement with the aggressive American escorts that now roam freely over Germany. They don't have long to wait. Indianer! Indianer! The warning cry for enemy fighters! Miller's head swivels, searching the sky. There, 8 o'clock high, a swarm of 4 Mustangs diving on the formation. The experienced pilots react instantly, breaking into the attack. Muller, lacking the instinct born of experience, reacts a fraction too slowly. The lead Mustang, flown by Captain John Godfrey of the 4th Fighter Group, selects Muller's aircraft. It's an easy shot. The German pilot's turn is too late and too shallow. Godfrey's 6.50 calibers converge on the Focke-Wulf's fuselage. Rounds tear through the cockpit. Muller slumps in his harness, killed instantly. His aircraft noses over and enters a terminal dive. 20 years old, 3 combat missions, one of dozens of similar stories playing out daily over Germany. This is the hidden victory of Doolittle's strategy. The experienced Luftwaffe pilots are being killed faster than they can be replaced. The replacements are so poorly trained that they die on their first few missions, never developing the skills to survive. Each American mission accelerates this death spiral. By late March, Luftwaffe unit commanders are reporting catastrophic pilot shortages. Some Gruppen are at 40% strength. Aircraft sit idle on airfields because there aren't enough qualified pilots to fly them. And those pilots who do fly are increasingly demoralized, knowing the odds are stacked impossibly against them. The Mustangs, Thunderbolts, and Lightnings rule the sky. German pilots who once flew with confidence now take off knowing they're likely flying to their deaths. May 1944. The skies over Germany. By May, the transformation is complete. The Luftwaffe, once the most feared air force in the world, has been shattered as an effective fighting force over Germany. The numbers tell the story. In the 4 months since Doolittle changed fighter doctrine, the Luftwaffe has lost over 2,200 fighters destroyed and another 1,500 damaged beyond immediate repair. More critically, over 800 pilots have been killed and 400 more wounded or captured. The experienced core of the fighter force, the veterans who knew how to fight and survive, has been decimated. American bomber losses have plummeted. Missions that would have cost 30 or 40 bombers in late 1943 now lose 5 or 6. Some missions, especially those with strong fighter escort, lose none at all. The bomber crews, who initially felt betrayed by fighters that ranged ahead instead of hovering protectively, now understand. They're safer precisely because the fighters are destroying German aircraft before they can attack. Colonel Hub Zemke, flying his 100th combat mission in May, looks down at Germany with a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. The Luftwaffe fighters that do appear are scattered, disorganized, often fleeing at the first sign of American escorts. The aggressive, coordinated attacks of 1943 are gone. What's left are desperate, poorly executed strikes by novice pilots who lack the training to survive. It's not a fair fight anymore. It's target practice. On May 12th, Lieutenant Colonel John Meyer of the 352nd Fighter Group leads his squadron over Brunswick. They encounter a formation of 20 Bf-109s attempting to intercept bombers. The German formation is ragged. Poor spacing, inconsistent altitude, clear signs of inexperience. Meyer's Mustangs hit them from above. In the 10-minute battle that follows, 12 German fighters are destroyed. The Americans lose none. It's not exceptional skill, it's simply the natural outcome when experienced pilots in superior aircraft engage poorly trained novices. The Luftwaffe High Command knows the war in the air is lost. Galland pleads with Göring and Hitler to withdraw fighters from the Reich's defense, to conserve them for a decisive battle later. His pleas are denied. The fighters must defend Germany, even as they're systematically destroyed. By late May, Luftwaffe fighter strength over Germany has dropped to roughly 50% of January levels, and the fighters that remain are largely flown by replacement pilots with minimal experience. The American fighter pilots start calling them Abschuss, easy kills. June 6, 1944, 0600 hours. Above Normandy, France, Lieutenant Quince Brown of the 78th Fighter Group crosses the English Channel in his P-47 Thunderbolt as dawn breaks over France. Below, the largest amphibious invasion in history is underway. Thousands of ships, hundreds of thousands of men hitting the beaches of Normandy. Brown's mission is to fly cover over the beachhead to protect the vulnerable troops from Luftwaffe attack. He and every other Allied pilot expects fierce resistance. The Germans have had 4 years to prepare defenses. Surely they'll throw everything they have at this invasion. Brown flies his patrol, 1 hour, then another. He sees Allied aircraft everywhere, fighters, bombers, transports, reconnaissance planes. The sky is thick with friendly aircraft. What he doesn't see is a single German fighter. Not one. The Luftwaffe manages only 50 sorties over Normandy on D-Day. 50 out of thousands of aircraft theoretically available. Compare this to the Allied air forces, which fly over 14,000 sorties. The disparity is so extreme it's almost comical, except it represents thousands of Allied lives saved. The German fighters that do appear are quickly driven off or destroyed. Luftwaffe units in France, already depleted by months of fighting over Germany, can't mount effective resistance. Their experienced pilots are dead or injured. Their replacement pilots are terrified of the overwhelming Allied air superiority. Their commanders know that sending fighters up is simply sending men to their deaths. General Feldmarschall Erwin Rommel, commanding German forces in France, watches the invasion unfold without air cover and knows the battle is already lost. The enemy has complete control of the air, he writes. They can operate at will. On the beaches, Allied soldiers who expected to be strafed and bombed by German aircraft fight without aerial harassment. The few German aircraft that do appear are immediately engaged by prowling Allied fighters. The Luftwaffe, which once dominated European skies, is absent from the most important battle of the war. This is Doolittle's victory. The aggressive fighter doctrine implemented in January, validated during Big Week in February, has achieved its purpose. By destroying the Luftwaffe's fighters and especially its irreplaceable experienced pilots, Doolittle has delivered something essential for D-Day: air supremacy. The invasion succeeds in large part because Allied soldiers fight beneath skies cleared of German aircraft. June 1944. 8th Air Force Headquarters, England. General Jimmy Doolittle reads the after-action reports from Normandy with quiet satisfaction. His gamble, the radical decision to unleash his fighters from defensive doctrine, has paid off beyond even his optimistic projections. The decision that terrified bomber crews in January is now recognized as brilliant strategy. The counterintuitive choice to send fighters hunting instead of defending has achieved what defensive tactics never could: the destruction of the Luftwaffe as an effective fighting force. The numbers are definitive. Since January, American fighters have destroyed over 5,000 German aircraft, roughly 2,800 in the air and 2,200 on the ground. Luftwaffe pilot losses exceed 2,000 dead and another 1,000 wounded or captured. Fighter pilot training schools in Germany can't replace these losses. The quality of new pilots entering combat continues to deteriorate. More importantly, the psychological impact is devastating. Luftwaffe pilots who once flew with confidence now take off with dread. They know they're outmatched in numbers, in aircraft performance, in pilot quality, in tactical freedom. The Americans dominate, and that domination is crushing German morale as effectively as it's destroying German aircraft. But Doolittle's victory came at a cost that he never speaks about publicly. In January, when he first implemented the new doctrine, bomber losses initially spiked. Bomber crews who felt abandoned filed complaints. Bomber commanders protested directly to General Carl Spaatz, Doolittle's superior. For several tense weeks, Doolittle's career hung by a thread. If the new tactics had failed, if bomber losses had remained high while fighters chased glory kills away from the formations, Doolittle would have been relieved of command. His reputation, earned leading the Tokyo raid, would have been destroyed. The aggressive fighter doctrine would have been discredited. But the tactics didn't fail. As fighters destroyed German aircraft in increasing numbers, as Luftwaffe pilot quality deteriorated, bomber losses dropped dramatically. The critics were silenced. The doctrine was validated. Looking back, Doolittle recognizes the key factors that made his strategy work. First, the P-51 Mustang. Without an escort fighter capable of flying to Berlin and back, the aggressive doctrine would have been impossible. The Mustang's range meant fighters could hunt anywhere over Germany without abandoning the bombers to fuel limitations. Second, pilot quality. American pilots received extensive training, 400 to 500 hours before entering combat. This training, combined with combat experience, created a pilot force qualitatively superior to the increasingly green Luftwaffe replacements. Third, numbers. By mid-1944, American fighter production was overwhelming. The Luftwaffe couldn't replace losses as fast as they accumulated. Each combat mission reduced the quality and quantity of German fighter opposition. Fourth, Doolittle's willingness to accept risk. A more cautious commander would have stuck with defensive doctrine despite its flaws. Doolittle's engineering background and test pilot experience gave him the ability to analyze problems objectively and implement radical solutions. The air war over Europe isn't over in June 1944. Fighting will continue until Germany's surrender in May 1945. But the outcome is no longer in doubt. The Luftwaffe will never recover from the destruction inflicted in those crucial months between January and June 1944. History remembers Jimmy Doolittle for the Tokyo raid, the daring 1942 attack that boosted American morale after Pearl Harbor. It's a good story. B-25 bombers launching from an aircraft carrier, striking the Japanese homeland when everyone said it was impossible. Doolittle leading from the front. But his real strategic genius, the decision that arguably shortened the war in Europe, was changing fighter doctrine in January 1944. It wasn't a glamorous decision. It didn't involve dramatic raids or personal heroism. It was a bureaucratic order changing how fighters would be employed. Yet this seemingly mundane decision destroyed German air power in 5 months. The transformation was remarkable. In December 1943, the Luftwaffe was winning the battle over Germany. American bomber losses were unsustainable. The strategic bombing campaign was in crisis. By June 1944, the Luftwaffe was a broken force, unable to contest Allied air operations. Doolittle's doctrine worked because it correctly identified the center of gravity. Not German aircraft factories, not infrastructure, but the irreplaceable experienced pilots flying for the Luftwaffe. Destroy the pilots, and you destroy the Air Force, regardless of how many replacement aircraft Germany produces. The doctrine was initially seen as crazy, reckless, abandoning the bombers to chase glory. Bomber crews called Doolittle's fighters little friends who weren't there when we needed them. The criticism stung, but Doolittle held firm. He understood something his critics didn't. The best defense is overwhelming offense. You can't protect bombers by hovering near them. You can only protect them by destroying the enemy fighters before they attack. And you destroy enemy fighters by hunting them aggressively, forcing them into combat on unfavorable terms, grinding down their strength in a battle of attrition. By D-Day, Doolittle had delivered what Eisenhower needed most: complete air supremacy. Allied troops hit the beaches beneath skies empty of German aircraft. The Luftwaffe, once the terror of Europe, couldn't contest the invasion. The crazy general's bold plan had worked. Within weeks of implementing aggressive fighter doctrine, the momentum shifted. Within months, the Luftwaffe was shattered. The sky over Europe belonged to the Allies, and with it came the ability to invade France, defeat Germany, and end the war. Sometimes genius looks like madness, until the results speak for themselves.